Today, or yesterday, we actually had a new patch for Resogun. There's a new game out for PS4 called Super Stardust Ultra. So go get that when you go home. We didn't make it the original one, of course, but still counts. And Outland is on 75% sale on Steam. Go get that. But without further ado, this kind of marketing bullshit, Ilari is going to come in, our CEO. He's going to say a couple of words, and then we'll see what happens after that. So applause to Ilari.
Hello, good evening. Good to see you all here. As Mikael said, we are honoring the man, the legend, Mr. Eugene Jarvis. Give a big hand for him. That's why we're here. So I'm basically here just to tell a short story why we are here. Have these wonderful people around you, and why Eugene is here with us today. So, as you may know, Eugene Jarvis has been one of the greatest pioneers of the arcade game industry. So he was the first guy who made a game that has side-scrolling. Am I right? Yeah, hey? Side-scrolling, have you heard about that?
What is that?
Yeah, I don't know. We need to ask him later today. The other stuff, you know, like he's sort of a kind of pioneer at this thing called twin stick shooting. Actually, he did the twin stick shooter, Robotron 2084. Hey, have you heard about that? No. You know, he thought at some point that, hey, arcade games are only single-player games. Why don't we kind of link a couple cabinets together and play one versus game? So that's a pretty big thing as well. So, this was the guy we met a year ago at DICE. At DICE Awards is an annual gaming Oscars event held in Las Vegas. And we were lucky to have our own little game called Resogun as a nominee for Action Game of the Year. And during that evening, we also met Eugene Jarvis, who got his Pioneer Award there. So we were like, oh man, Eugene's over there. Oh man, let's go to talk with the guy. Anyway, we ended up talking a little bit before he got his award. And we were there with the other co-founder of Housemarque, Harri Tikkanen is around here. Harri. And chairman of the board, who's not here, Benny, was there. So we had a kind of a nice conversation there. Always, we said, yeah, that's a very nice guy, very brilliant. What the hell? And then always at 3 a.m., the last man standing at the center bar of Hard Rock Hotel. We bumped into this guy as well. Had a drink, and he's even nicer guy, very brilliant, he must be a genius or something. And then, we recovered the next day, Friday morning, having a lousy life at the Strip of Las Vegas, Cosmopolitan Lounge, having drinks. Somebody says it was Benny. Why don't we kind of invite this guy over to Finland? We should do that. Okay, well, that's a brilliant idea. And then we started to figure out how big an influence Eugene has had on our games what we've done. The biggest hits we've done. Like our breakout hit on console, Superstars HD, a while back on PlayStation 3. Even though the subject matter is more of asteroids, but actually the gameplay is all about Robotron, twin stick shooting. Then the next game, Dead Nations, twin stick shooters, they set in zombie apocalypse. It's twin stick, there's twin stick shooting there as well. Also, it's about Smash TV, another great game he did earlier. So, okay, there's a lot of that thing going on. And then always the game that got the DICE game Oscar nomination, Resogun. It's a homage to Defender. So we thought, hey, we need to get this guy here. At least, say thank you. So, yeah, well, So, thank you, Eugene. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everything. You have been so big influence on our career. I don't know whether we'd be here without your even direct or indirect influence. So, well, we have a great chance here to just talk with the man and have the questions. And now I think Mika is going to introduce the panelists. And we go from there. You have a chance to ask the questions you always wanted to ask from Mr. Eugene Jarvis. I think there are plenty of those. Okay, Mika, please, forward.
Let's have a round of applause again for Ilari. Thank you. So, let's get down to the magic hour. Please, if you will, there's much more space up here also in the front. Don't be shy. The way the program's going to go is that I'm going to ask a couple of cool guests to come over here. Then we'll talk amongst each other, and then we'll open up the floor after that to questions from the audience. So you can always shout out stuff, but we'll keep it between us for a while first. So first of all, I'll start with a man very close to my heart. I can't say that about many men. I've shared rooms with him, I've talked deep shit with him, and I think we'll keep on doing that for a amount of years to come. He's the lead guy from the Resogun team. Please give a hand of applause to Harry Kruger. Next, we have a Finnish legend in his own right, and a pioneer in the internet and tech security side. He's also an arcade enthusiast. Apparently he doesn't have all the arcades he used to because of family and everything, but he'll tell us a little bit more. Mikko Hyppönen, please. And he's got the Defender sign, so that's I'm a bit jealous now. And yeah, without further ado, the man, the legend, Eugene, come on up on stage. Hey, so what's up? Let's have a seat here. I'm going to be a bit higher above for some reasons. And Rule's going to give you guys a microphone. And basically, you'll have to share. Sharing is caring. Can we really briefly do like an intro, which I already did, but then...
Sure, well I have a microphone, so I guess I can go first. So I guess most of you guys already know me, but my name is Harry Kruger and I work at Housemarque. I've been with the guys for just over 6 years now, and I've really enjoyed my time working with them. I've learned a lot from some really talented guys working at Housemarque, and I've also contributed to the creation of some really kick-ass games. Most recently, I worked on Resogun as the lead programmer, and then I went on to direct the 2 expansions that the second of which is being released in, I think, a week from now. And yeah, I'm actually really excited to be here. I'm looking forward to seeing what we end up talking about.
Yeah. Cool.
Does this work?
No, that's for the videotaping, so we'll have to share these.
So, my name is Mikko Hyppönen, and I'm a game programmer. I wrote my first games on Commodore 64 around 1985. I sold my first games around 1986. I ended up selling several great game graphics routines to the Bröderbund publishing house around probably 1987. But then I unfortunately ended up switching careers and became a computer security guy, which I've been doing with F-Secure since 1991, and I'm still working there today. But I am quite a bit into classic games, and by classic games I mean the games from the golden years, from 1978 to 1983. That's what I define as the...
There's a good cutoff point, 1983.
Yeah. Yes. Well, maybe 1984. Marble Madness is 1984, so I'll count that in. So I ended up collecting old arcade games, started collecting those in the late 1990s, and I built a somewhat nice collection, which unfortunately isn't exactly intact anymore. I ended up unfortunately selling some of those games, but I still very much enjoy playing classic games, including your games. So, Eugene.
Cool, man. Well, you know, if you ever want to change your careers, I think they've got some openings at Housemarque or some of the other.
He's already doing the hiring for us too. That's
You know,
You have a card?
I love it.
you know, I'll get a headhunter's fee out of it, I think.
No, Eugene, we'll get to you actually right now because we're here for you. I mean, we're here for us too, but you're a cool guy, so we decided to have an evening with Eugene, if you will.
Okay.
And I have a set of questions here leading on the history of gaming and our relation to it. So I'd like to start off with, if you could briefly start off and describe your passion toward video games, and then we'll go each three of us.
You know, it's kind of bizarre because as a child, growing up in the era of like 3 channels of television and no consoles, no iPhones, if you can believe it. It was for me, what was fun was like playing in the mud with sticks, you know, and then blowing them up, you know.
Yeah.
And no, it was a very different world. And I remember as a child, I think I was about, well, maybe 14 or 15. I saw a game that was a prototype game of Space War, which was, I guess, really, in my mind, the first real computer game, and which was designed back in like 1963, and amazing with spaceships and you know, combat, player versus player combat, and vector monitors, really interesting stuff. I don't, you know. And it just was mesmerizing, and I was fortunate enough to play that game. It was only running on like computers at universities typically, and I was fortunate enough in my freshman year in college to find that game in the basement of the physics laboratory at Berkeley, where I was studying computer science, and just to play that game, you know, I had seen Pong before, and Pong is a very interesting game, but for about 10 minutes, you know, I mean, it's cool, but it's just, you can't dedicate your life to it. But this game was so rich and so mind-blowing, and I remember going into that computer lab at maybe midnight and coming out at like 9 in the morning, and it was like, wow, what happened to that night? You know, it was just, it totally sucked me in, and I guess that's what kind of sucked me into video games. Just that to have you know, it's an artificial reality that you completely lose yourself into. I mean, it's kind of like watching a movie. I mean, that can happen to you, but you're part of it. You're an actor. You're a part of the story. It's kind of about you too, and so it just was this totally unique, you know, interactive medium that just, wow, you know, so I kind of felt like, you know,
yeah,
I got to get involved in this somehow. But, you know, it was just kind of in a university environment and everything, and what was much more accessible to me at the time was pinball games.
Right.
So I really became more interested in pinball as something that was a real career, you know, like
exactly.
Video games were something that was in the lab somewhere, kind
Future
of like
tech.
Yeah, it was like making nuclear bombs or something.
Yeah.
You know, it really wasn't accessible to the average guy.
But it sounds very passionate still. I mean, as an experience, you're spending the night at the physics lab's basement, and that's passion.
Yeah, and I'm sure probably everyone here has had that experience with a video game. I bet. Who has experienced just losing yourself into a video game for hours on end? I mean, yeah, everybody here. I mean, I
think we can all share that notion.
Yeah, and it becomes your reality. I mean, it's amazing.
Mikko, for you, if you would, fairly briefly, what defines your passion towards video games?
Well, I guess there's several angles, but one particular thing about collecting old arcade games is this idea of preservation, like saving the history. Like old pinballs, nobody throws away an old pinball because everybody knows it can be fixed because it's a physical thing. But when old video games, like the full-sized coin-ops break, like the screen breaks or the chip goes bad or the RAMs go bad and you can't find any replacements, people just throw them to junkyard. That's what was happening to majority of old video games during the 1990s. And I realized around 1996 or 7 or 8 that I could actually go back and buy those old games I used to play as a teenager, and they cost nothing, like 200 Finn marks at the time. That's what I think I paid 350 Finn marks for the first game I bought, which was Atari Marble Madness. And then I realized that it's not just the game. Of course, the game's important. It's also the cabinets, which have like unique graphics. Like this here is a Defender marquee. That's the thing that lights up.
It's a piece of art in itself.
It is a piece of art. That's just the marquee on top of the cabinet, which lights up. Then you have the whole cabinet with graphics on it. And some of these can be very, very nice. And that gets you into restoration, like buying an old beaten up cabinet and fixing it up, just like you would fix up a car or restore a car. And I got into that. So it's very rewarding because you feel like you're saving part of the history.
Definitely a passion in itself, and it's you're holding on to that thing, and it's like preserving something that everybody else may be throwing to the curbside. Harry, well, for you, you still actively program games. How would you define your passion towards the art of video games?
Well,
It's a tough question.
it is a bit of a tough question. I mean, I'm generally a bit of an obsessive kind of guy, so anything I do, I just jump in 100% usually, And I enjoy a pretty broad range of games, from like point-and-click adventures to bullet hell shoot 'em ups, But for me, video games have always been a very personal experience. So even though I've enjoyed playing games, with friends and having that social angle to them, for me it's always about getting lost in that world, as Eugene was saying before. And there's a little bit about finding and fighting, kind of like competing with yourself there. There's that sense of self-improvement, just like inching your way towards glorious victory.
Challenging yourself.
Exactly. And I think that's something that has drawn me perhaps a little bit closer to games that are a bit more arcadey in nature, because you do have that kind of sense of personal growth there. It's not just about observing the story or watching cool cutscenes. It's about actively creating the story.
Yeah.
And the story is the gameplay itself.
Would you say that part of the fun is overcoming yourself? Because I know that you play pretty hardcore games.
I think so, yeah. Of course, a little bit of competition is always nice.
There you go. Hey,
But ultimately, yeah, it is about just finding those ways to improve yourself at a game and just get more out of it,
Kicking ass and taking names, right?
Always.
Let's pass the mic to Eugene over here. You touched upon a topic that you got into the pinball world.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to hear a bit about the pinball world, and maybe even how the transition from that to the video game world was.
Well, it's interesting. In many ways, pinball kind of formed the basis of arcade games, video games, and it's not something you would think, but originally games like Pong and Space War and were player versus player games, because really in the early days of video technology, before the microprocessor, there was no AI. So the best AI is the guy sitting next to you, So it was all player versus player, and pinball is yes, you can play someone else, but it's really a game against human against the machine, and how can you beat that machine? Can you? I know back in the day it was all about getting a free game. And you would try to, if you couldn't, steal money out of the coin box or kick the coin switch to start the game.
You always wait for that click at the, and you get those two numbers right, and you hear that really loud sound.
Right.
And you won.
The knocker, and boom, and so it was really, and that was kind of, but the free game, it was kind of like new life. It was a new life because, you wanted to keep playing. You wanted to, and obviously, there's the competitive element, as Harry mentioned, and it is. I used to play a lot of chess as a kid, and there was something really cool about totally destroying someone's human ego. You know, the complete destruction of the mental capacity of your friend. And
So sweet. Right?
so that's kind of carried on. You know, that I think that's part of the thing. You know, it's not only man against machine, but also man against man. But
And then that came to video games as a. Was it an easy transition from pinball to video games then, or?
you know, I guess the hardest part of it was getting to, you know, you start with a blank screen. You know, I mean, that sucks. I mean, like a pinball game, you've got flippers, you've got, you know, bumpers, you've got, you know, ball shooters and things. And no matter how horrible of a pinball designer you are, you still have a pinball game.
Yeah.
You know, and
It's a basic system.
yeah, and with a video game, there's no limit to how horrible you can be. I mean, you know, it's a blank screen. I mean, especially when I was working on this Defender game, which I knew absolutely nothing about. Even though I'd worked at Atari, which was, you know, kind of the inventor of video games in the modern sense, I was working on pinball, so I really didn't know that much about video games. And it seemed easy to me, but starting on that, it's just like, you start with a blank screen, and like, what the hell do I do now?
What was the criteria like when they gave you the job and you kind of like start off with that? What was the criteria? What was expected of it?
What, for a video game designer?
For video games, yeah.
You know, it was, I think at that point, just a very large ego.
Yeah.
You know,
To be like
just a good, you know, just a
Steve Jobs kind of thing.
Yeah,
Just walk in
over-promise.
and, I got this.
You know, I mean, it's like I remember the management at Williams is, you know, I kind of, I mean, after being in the pinball as a programmer, which you do all the lights, the sounds, and everything, but there's always this like mechanical designer guy that's doing the pinball, and after a while, it's like, you know, I hate this guy telling me what to do. You know, it's like, I mean, you don't like being the second fiddle. You know, and I think within every computer programmer, it's like there's a megalomania. There's this desire to conquer the world, you know, through algorithms, you know, to just completely, because you have this you know, it's so often in life, I mean, if you're managing people, you say, do this, and they go, fuck off, you know?
Yeah.
And like a computer never tells you to fuck off. You know, it's very patient. It'll do whatever you tell it to do. And then there's all these networks of computers. It's like, if your program could be running, you know, on all the computers, I mean, you could just take over everything. You know, and it's the total megalomania, exalted ego sage. So that was my motivation with
Egocentric. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask actually Mikko, because, you know, being from Finland, we had a different perspective than probably, you know, Eugene had you know, in the US. If you could pass the mic to Mikko, what would be your first experience with arcades, and how was it, in your view, presented in Finland?
Well, in the good old days, in the early 1980s, you would find a video game from any gas station, basically, or from any bar. You would have a pinball and you would have a video game. I remember playing Gravitar at the Kesoil. I remember playing Xevios at some bar, Galaga in some small joint. And of course, then we had places like Linnanmäki, local amusement park, which would have three full-blown arcades filled with pinballs and video games. So that's how you basically saw them. And that was still the time when the graphics and sound on home computers sucked, but the graphics and sound on the coin-ops were great. And of course, right now, today, it's the other way around. No, that's a bit sad.
We're working on it. Now, I'm sure actually Harry can tell a little bit about, you know, what the future of, you know, home console and everything can be. But briefly, let's go back to, am I right, you grew up in Greece?
Yeah, well, I actually was born in Australia.
Right,
but
okay.
I spent most of my formative years in Greece. So up until about 10 years old, I was in Australia. So that was actually my first experience with arcades.
With arcades. How was it over in Australia then?
Yeah, so just for some context, this was mid to late 80s. So of course there were lots of arcade venues there dedicated for that purpose. There lots of smoking, lots of drinking usually there, pretty dark places. Not really a place that a kid would or should be in, but that kind of made it especially appealing to kids.
There's always, even in Finland, that was the only reason why kids got allowed in bars, because there's arcades.
Yeah. But I remember, much to the dismay of my mother, actually, I was obsessed with these things because, as Mikko pointed out, okay, you had home systems. I had, NES, and I had a quick brush with like Atari 2600. But it's like when you saw the fidelity of the arcade game, the experience was just so much more spectacular. It was kind of the equivalent of going to a cinema to watch a movie versus watching it on your shitty tube TV at home.
And those tube TVs back in the days were like, 20 inches exactly at max.
And I remember that at times I would actually just wait until everyone was fast asleep, and I would actually just sneak out my bedroom window, and I would actually just walk. I shit you not, it was probably about 4 or 5 kilometers away, so about 3 miles or so. And I would walk there, this little kid with his pockets just full of quarters, a huge smile of anticipation, and I'd just be walking for like an hour to the nearest arcade place, just to play like Bubble Bobble and Rygar and Narc and whatever other games were there,
That's passion.
And my mother, poor mother, she would always just come over like clockwork. After a couple of hours, she would be there.
I'll pick you up.
Just kind of like, shit, my time is running out, I need to get another high score running, But that was in Australia. When I went to Greece, of course, things were quite different because we didn't have any dedicated arcade venues for arcades. So as Mikko mentioned, it was mostly like cafeterias, restaurants, bars. They just have 1 or 2 machines here and there. And once again, you'd be in an environment with like smoke, people drinking, gambling next to you, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was still pretty lucky that I got to experience a lot of the greats, in my opinion.
The Australian and even in US a little bit.
Yeah, they had good taste, I think.
They do.
The machines they brought over.
So let's consider this a little bit. I'd like to coin the term as, if we will, a culture of arcade, expanding from the 80s to the early and mid 90s even, that there was this social construct built around the arcade machine. You'd go to the arcade parlors in the States, and then in Finland and other countries you go to the bars or where it was, and you kind of gather around this thing, and if you're really good, people would just instantly gravitate towards your skill set. And it was very much a social experience. You'd hang out at these places, and that sort of defined that era. Arcades were very much a part of that culture. So coming back to Eugene here, working in the sort of heyday and seeing how the kids were adopting that culture, did it have an impact on you? Like when you started, with Defender, you made Robotron, you made more games. Did you see the kids play? Did you get that feedback, and how did it feel?
Yeah, I mean, it became, that was what it was all about, really. When you're doing a game, it's a mind virus, and you want it to infect the maximum amount of people out there. And so I remember you'd put the game out in an arcade for the first time, and it was very tense, because it was a very brutal and instant evaluation. What amazed me was no matter how much depth you put in the game, no matter how many years you worked on it, a player could, within 2 or 3 minutes, everybody watching the game and everybody playing the game would decide whether this game sucked or not. Whether it was great or whether it was crap. And it was very humiliating. If you had a game and you put it next to some old like Space Invaders game or something, and the players just kind of walked by your game and played, the 3-year-old Space Invaders game. And it was just like devastating to your ego. So it was very much, very competitive as far as wanting your game to succeed, and kind of like you know, pop music or something where you want to hear your record on the radio.
Yeah, and movies and everywhere. It's the popular culture. You want it to be a part of it. And the funny thing is that, like you mentioned, you put years into a game, and then once you put it out there, like instantly you can see the feedback, and you know if it's good or bad. Usually at those very extremes too. And I'm wondering, because nowadays, for example, us, we can fix a game. Like we just put out a patch for Resogun yesterday. It's broken, you know, and of course. But then back in those days, that's it. You release a game, and it's very much for the rest of history. That's it. How does that feel? It's like a very defined system.
Yeah, it was certainly. I think the programmers were a little more careful about testing their code in those days.
Yeah.
You know, it was because you burned it into a ROM, and that was it. You know, and from that point on, I mean, the good thing about it was from that point on, any bug became a feature, and in fact, what amazed me was some of the most brilliant parts of the design of, say, Defender and Robotron were actually bugs, and were actually totally unintentional programming errors that turned out to be some of the most brilliant features of those games, and it kind of created a lot of longevity. It added much more complexity to the gameplay than I, as a programmer, conceived. You know, so I guess that's the most magical thing about when you're designing a game, is it becomes much more than you put into it. There's sometimes it's the interaction of the characters, of the enemies, of the player, of the world you're making. That this artificial reality, you know, I guess they call it emergent behavior or something, and these artificial intelligences and realities converge to make something that's way better than you ever thought. You know,
it's probably a beautiful thing to find out that once you put it out there, it starts living on its own a little bit, and then you start learning from it, you know, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's probably a wonderful feeling. Mikko, I'd like to ask you, because you know, we talk about this design methodology that was implemented in these games, and people could pick it up instantly. You know, you sit or stand in front of a game, and within minutes you could even give it feedback. Like, this is shit. How do you feel? What's your take on the whole simplistic design? I think this is one of the biggest reasons you are into the arcade era.
Yeah, I like games which are ruthless and tough and fast and violent and really tough on the players. That's, I mean, as they call them, the gamers' games, the ones which really require you to be good at it to really get anywhere. You know, Robotron at level 10, a prime example. The game's over in 15 seconds. Your three guys are gone if you don't know what you're doing. And yet there are guys who will keep at it and keep going for half an hour.
Actually, there was a marathon tournament the other day, and I think it was about 36 hours.
Level 10.
Oh man, that's yeah.
Holy mother of God!
That's good.
It is insane, and of course, a good example on how lasting this culture can be. That we are still here right now, 2015, discussing about these old games, and there are marathon runs like that still going on. And I actually spent a big part of my New Year holiday watching Twitch for awesome games done quick. These speed runs, many of which are done on old arcade games, on old home consoles, where people just optimize on how quickly they can finish a particular game. And it's just a great example of the lasting power of a simple game. A good recent example would be what you guys are doing, and also another great Finnish success story, Trials. I don't know if you've seen Trials. It's a motorcycling game where you can only accelerate or de-accelerate and move the guy to, you know, move the bike around. You don't steer at all. As simple as it can be, it's very, very rewarding.
Do you think that this simple design is sort of an art form that's fading away, or?
I think in many ways mobile gaming is bringing some of that back, because the controls have to be very simple, because you have no joystick, you have no buttons. So I don't think it's going anywhere.
So some of the same philosophy could maybe remain in there. Thank you. Harry, what do you think in terms of, well, you know, you put some design into some games, and what's your take on the whole simple design aspect?
Yeah, well, I have to go back to what Mikko mentioned about games being ruthless and kind of unforgiving and in many ways uncompromising in their vision. But I don't think that necessarily has to sacrifice accessibility, because the beautiful thing from my point of view for these classic arcades is that yes, they were brutal, but they were easy to pick up. They were just really hard to master. So Robotron, it'll kick your ass in seconds, but you know exactly what went wrong. You'll know the scope of the game, you'll know how you can improve, and with each quarter you will slowly inch yourself to victory eventually. And that's something that, of course, quite consciously we attempted to integrate into Resogun quite recently. So in many ways we believe that that's kind of the timeless gameplay values of these arcade games. Absolutely, and we were actually talking with Eugene yesterday, and he mentioned the fact that the original free-to-play games or pay-to-play games are, of course, arcades. And there was something you said about the boss fight scenes, where you come to, if you can pass the mic, maybe Eugene can comment here, but the thing is you come to a really difficult boss fight, and you have your handful of quarters, and you end up shoving it all in there until you can get the energy level of the boss to the bare minimum. That's a design choice, right?
Yeah, I mean there was there was an economic problem in the arcades where the players were getting so good at these games, despite our best efforts to destroy their egos, that they would play these games for hours and hours on a single coin. And so it was like, how do we make these people pay? It's like this isn't, and we'd set the difficulty on 10 or 11 or whatever. They still would play forever. So it became kind of a new design attribute was to have essentially a paywall where, and
even modernly we can
this thing known as a boss monster, which in Smash TV and Narc were my two games of that era. And it was time, 2 or 3 minutes had passed. It was time to collect some money from these guys, and no matter how good they were. And but the other part of that era, we had what was known as the buy-in, and it's kind of like the free-to-play model today in the mobile, where if you were a bad player, your game wasn't over. You just put more money in. And in some games you could actually buy more smart bombs or buy a stronger character, and this way we were able to monetize not only the great players, which most of those guys are really cheap anyway. Yeah. You don't make any money off of them really. But it's all the really bad players. You want to get their money. That's because that's
especially those. Yeah.
Yeah. There's millions of those. So it was a monetization strategy.
Let's move on to Harry has something to say about the...
Yeah, just something I'd like to say on that front, because it's kind of interesting how I do remember early on I just wanted to see the game, get to the next level, and I'd kind of impulsively just be throwing in more quarters, right? But at some point I just kind of realized what was happening.
you got in on a trick.
Yeah. And basically there's the other thing as well, that when you reach like a super hard part of the game, you know that if you just continue, you're probably going to survive like 3.5 seconds, and then you're just going to have to put another coin in. So if you actually just restart from the beginning, you're getting a lot more value for your money.
True, but you don't get to see the next level.
Yeah, and the thing is that actually teaches you in the long run to play the game a lot better. So that's how you master the game, not by continuing, but by restarting. And one other aspect to this is that I think, I'm not sure how Smash TV or Narc did this, but in most arcade games, if you continued, your score was reset. So if you were actually going for the best possible score, continuing was out of the question anyway.
No, we let them buy their score.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of games.
What Street Fighter 2 actually did that was really interesting was it allowed you to continue, and I think the minimum score you would get from hits and punches was like 100 points, right? So you always had 2 zeros at the end of the score. But if you continued, you would keep the score and it would add 1 point to your score. So just by looking at the last 2 digits, you would actually see how legit the score actually was.
I think it's a mechanic that we're still using in some resident stuff, or we're looking into it.
Yeah, we have that in the hero mode for Resogun actually.
Yeah.
So usually the last digit is 0, but every time that you beat a level, it adds 1 point to your score, so you can kind of see at what level this guy lost all his lives.
Ingenious part of game design. Mikko, it seems like you have a...
And for Outland, sorry, I'm on the road here. But for Outland, what we did was there was this kind of like this arcade mode where you collected coins and you had this time, a score, an actual timed run. And there we did the opposite. There you had multiples of 100 for your score. Every time you got hit by an enemy, it gave you 1 point of shame.
Oh.
and that of course capped at 99.
Right. But these are kind of the insights that only guys who play the games a lot might know. So.
And it actually does remind me of Easter eggs. And I remember leaving Easter eggs inside the games I used to write a long time ago. And I know you've put in some Easter eggs. So I want to ask these two game programmers about the Easter eggs they've left into their games. Eugene?
I think it had more bugs than Easter eggs, but I was actually, I think there was a few we put into Stargate, but I just had my problem with Easter eggs was it's just too damn much work. It's like, you got to be at some point you want to be finished with the game, and spending time to code in an Easter egg was kind of a pain in the ass. So
it's like extra.
I had my partners do that typically.
We were actually talking with Mikko before we started here, and we started on the topic of Easter eggs, and he's like, up, down, down. That's Defender, and you get the credits, right?
I think Stargate and Robotron are the ones which have Easter eggs, which show your names that I'm unaware of.
Actually,
it's interesting. We actually put that in there for copyright cases. Because people actually were completely duplicating the game, and and claiming that basically the argument was, I guess, and it was very common here in Europe. The argument was that you can't copyright a video game because unlike a movie, every time you play the game, it's different. It's a different performance, so it's not. A movie is the same every time. You can copyright that, but a video game, because the player is participating and enhancing the performance, it's not a copyrightable thing.
Sounds like a sound argument.
Yeah, and so there was actually a lot of cases, and there was a big case in London with Defender, and this was 3 or 4 years after it was completely ripped off. They finally ruled that a video game was actually a work of art that could be copyrighted.
Right. So you started putting in the credits at a certain type of...
So you could prove that, because you could hit it and go, okay, there's my name.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not your thing, man. How did my name get in your game?
Hey, Eugene, looking at this development from there and how copyright law and everything has changed, and I think there's a good linkage from what you said about modern games having this free-to-play aspects or pay-to-play things. Where would you think that the future of video games lies?
I think it's a constantly evolving phenomenon, and it is amazing to you look at Pong or even say Defender, and then you put that next to more modern games. In some of the big budget games like the Call of Duties or the what the hell is that thing? Destiny. Big budget productions. It's shocking. It's a few pixels versus like incredibly photorealistic, amazing realities. They even have like stories now in video games. And soundtracks. And beautiful. Like
we don't know anything about the stories. I think there's a good soundtrack though.
Dialogue even. Who would have thought?
So it's becoming more of an immersive, explosive.
Yeah, and it's kind of embracing. It's not just about blowing up the alien. It's you can actually.
For some people, it still is.
Yeah, I guess so. But there's games that make you cry and hit all those.
Robotron makes me still cry. So
yeah. But it's just gone in a million different directions. it's I think that's kind of the beauty of the field, is that you just don't know what's going to be next. You know, whether it's new levels of free to play, materialistic, money grubbing things, or maybe brilliant new art. I mean, and it's kind of the root of it was kind of getting people's money. You know, I mean, the arcade was really.
It's always business, you know.
Yeah, you're trying to. Yeah.
We're in it for the long run, and it's going to be a wild ride. So might as well enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a commercial art form. So we are tainted by, guys like Harry, they actually want to be paid. You know, I mean, really. You're doing it for the fun, right? I mean, that's the root of it. But people have to get paid. They have to.
Let me know if you don't want to get paid.
That's right.
It's all negotiable.
That's right. He's hiring anyone that doesn't want to get paid. Right? So you have this commercial aspect of it. So it's like art, but it's also commercial. And then there's all different levels of that. So it's amazing.
Well, how about everybody else here? Do you have a vision or?
I think the future of gaming is going to diversify. We're going to see more and more of different kinds of games. We will continue to have these simplistic, Mario style games or Defender kind of games, like really simple. Then we have these huge things, and we have future things like HoloLens-based Minecraft, which I believe, by the way, is the reason Microsoft bought Minecraft.
It seems to be,
yeah. So, and there will be future things like that, but I don't think these old things will die out. We will have a whole range of games, but very few of the old style games will die out. That's what I believe.
Right on. Harry?
I kind of agree with the general sentiment as well, that games are just getting more and more diverse. There's no one specific road. There's many different roads that gaming is taking simultaneously. We're going to see a lot of innovation in lots of different genres, and I think there's going to be a lot of the games that we love, even the classic arcade-style games, or games that have occasionally been underrepresented, will keep their place in the medium as well.
If it's up to us, we'll at least hold that flag up high and see how it goes. I'd like to, at this point, thank you, gentlemen, for taking part in this panel. And can we have a round of applause for everybody here? Let's still stay seated. And what I'll do now is I'll open up the mic to the floor. So please, anybody who's ever had that one question bugging in the back of your head, it can be for of course, Mikko and Harry. You can ask Eugene questions, but if you ever wanted to ask Eugene a question, now's the time. You probably won't get another one, so raise your hand and I'll come over and you can ask the question.
We're Finns, come on.
It's Finland, absolutely no questions at all. All right, let's start here.
Great show. I'm Ari, I'm a game designer at a Finnish company. And I'd like to ask Eugene, did you design an end to the games that you made? For example, let's say Defender, which I know the best, but I'm not that good a player, so I never reached an end. Is there one in your games?
What was the question again?
Well, is there an end to your games?
Oh, is there an end?
Did you design one?
Yeah, I mean, Defender never has an end. It was in that that was kind of the beauty of that era of the arcade was the fantasy was the enthusiasm was you could play forever. If you were good enough, you would never die. You could play forever, and so you were trying to essentially attain immortality through never dying, and so there was no upper limit to the game, and that's kind of interesting why there are still like marathon players today, because there's not really an upper limit. I guess eventually the score wraps around though, and there's a arithmetic overflow error. But that was kind of the thing there. Now some of the other games like Narc, there was actually a climactic ending scene. So it depends on the.
That's the beauty of endless gaming, that there's probably going to be somebody who tries to do it. So still it's streaming stuff at least.
Yeah.
So you have a second question?
Yes, please. If I may, I'd like to ask what kind of games have you been playing lately? What kind of games have you spent most time with?
Resogun.
Yeah. Besides Resogun, actually I hate to admit it, but I have played my fair share of Candy Crush.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thanks for the question.
Not really. Well, it's kind of a scam, you know?
All right.
It's about the music, though. I love that music. You know? It really is.
Hi. On controlling scheme, Defender personally had really trouble when I was a kid because it's pretty much a joystick up and down with 5 buttons.
Yeah.
For thrust, turn, boost, the hyper thing and bomb and everything.
Yeah.
What on earth? Why did you come up with such a tricky control scheme?
You know, it was kind of an evolution, where the most popular game in the arcade in that era were Space Invaders and Asteroids, and also Space War. And so really it was kind of taking the right hand of Space War or Asteroids, and the left hand from kind of Space Invaders, but turning it sideways. So it was kind of a sideways Space Invaders, Asteroids kind of thing. So it's like a cross-pollination. And I really think it's amazing for designers out there, take 2 kind of different genres or 2 different things and try to pollinate them together. And you can really, sometimes you come up with an amazing new concept just by, you know, taking chocolate and peanut butter, for instance, you know? But no, yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, you never even considered trying like 4-way joystick to make it easier to play?
Interesting, yeah.
You already had 4-way joystick by then.
Yeah, exactly. But I think actually I did want to have a joystick for your left hand in Defender, but they didn't. You know, at least I couldn't find one. And
just around that, we actually talked about it today.
Yeah.
It was just around that era when it was available, but you put the Space Invaders sideways, and that was the.
But you know what the funny thing was, it actually because I played versions with joysticks, it's not as fun. The reverse button actually gave you a little more freedom than just a joystick.
Mikko might have something to say because he thinks the Stargate is actually more rewarding, am I right?
Well, you know, if you think that control is hard, I don't know if you've played Stargate with the real arcade controls. It has 2 more buttons and it's crazier. It's just really, for a first-time player, it must be one of the most intimidating games. You just can't figure out how it works and what are you supposed to do. However, once you get into it, it's once again very rewarding. And as an anecdote, I'd just like to state for the record that I do believe that the best Stargate player in all of Finland is the guy who's right now the chairman of board of Nokia.
There's a lot of hours into that game, I suppose.
A true educational game.
Yes, indeed. Time well spent, right?
Exactly.
All right, do we have more questions here?
Hi there. I was wondering, back in the day, arcade games used to have all custom hardware. How did you design the hardware and what were the limitations there?
You know, it was one of the kind of the cool things in that era, though the technology was primitive, was in the arcade you kind of had a budget to have your own hardware, and you know, if you wanted to have 27 buttons or you know 3.5 joysticks, and so really the hardware was somewhat flexible, and I guess some of the early games like Defender, I think that was the first video game that Williams did, and I guess our parameters for the hardware were that it worked. And so, but once we kind of got by that one, then for Robotron, we actually created one of the first GPU, graphics processing units. That was a custom ASIC, custom silicon, to do all the graphics overload for that many, you know, to get, I don't know, maybe 150 characters on the screen, which was really not possible with just the
It's a lot of action, at least for that time. And
Yeah. So it was. So that was kind of cool to be able to specify a custom chip to be built specifically for your game.
You also did some music stuff, sound design stuff?
Actually, when I started at Atari in pinball, that was my first job, was doing electronic sounds and actually we didn't even have music in those days. It was
noises.
And it was not, it was distracting from the game, really. I'm still not really comfortable with music,
You'll have to talk to Audrey more. Do we have a next question? All right, here we go.
Hello. This question's a bit about video game preservation. A few years back, I worked on a game room, which was a commercial emulator for the Xbox, which was a pretty cool experience, programming old hardware and seeing all the old stuff work on it. But yeah, as time goes on, the old hardware fails. The only way people experience a lot of these games that you design to suck money out of them is by paying, like $4 online and playing it through an emulator or downloading MAME. Let's face it, who hasn't? So how do you feel about that? Like, your games are these days being presented in a different environment than what you originally intended.
It's kind of interesting. Ignoring the massive copyright theft, which is fine with me. I think we need to make the old games play, so I'm fine with that. But it's funny. We had a main cabinet over at Housemarque today, and the guys were going, hey, let's play Defender, okay, cool, and we get it up, and it's like, well, we're playing Defender on a vertical monitor, and the screen is turns out, since it's a horizontal game, the screen was about the size of a phablet.
A cell phone, yeah.
Like a 6-inch cell phone. And the controls were kind of reversed too. And
we have that one up, but yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't kind of, and it almost ran in real time, it was emulating the 1 megahertz Defender hardware at 4.6 gigahertz, and it almost ran. Except when it bogged down a little
Clearly,
bit.
it's not the same as the original experience. Close.
So, but it was kind of distressing. I love to see the games continue on, but the Defender control panel was very, it's like the layout was very ergonomic, and it's kind of like emulating the game of tennis, except you're playing with your right foot with a tennis racket, and it's like, yeah, it's the same experience. It looks the same, So I have kind of mixed feelings about that.
All right, thanks. Next question.
Are you aware of the clones of your games? For example, Jeff Minter, the British eccentric gentleman, has made copies of your Robotron, Lamatron, and then Defender as well. Are you aware of those remakes?
At least Resogun you know about.
Yeah. No, Jeff Minter, he's a strange guy. He's, I guess he's in Wales. He's obsessed with sheep, and llamas. I guess his sheep bored him, so now he's like into llamas. And I think if you live up in the hills there, I understand. But no, he had an interesting take, and I think it's a genre. It's that kind of twin stick genre, and everybody has their own take on it. And so I find it really fascinating to play some of those games, and but he should put it in an arcade cabinet.
Definitely.
Come on!
If you're gonna take the art form, keep it in a good form there. Thank you. I think this might be the last question of the evening, Jere?
Second to last.
Okay, no pressure then, but my question is basically that you've been a huge influence, kind of like, well, I'm one of the guys who made Superstars HD, and Harry there made Resogun, so we were hugely influenced by your games, basically. But time has passed, and you're still working on games. So do you have any examples or interesting anecdotes about some games that have influenced your design, like currently?
It's funny, some of the games that I've really loved, I've never had a chance to make a version of them or put my take on it. Like I really was a huge player of the Age of Empires series of games, and I don't know how many hours were, how many brain cells were lost in that effort. But just that whole genre of kind of having your own little civilization, and I've always, I have a fantasy someday I would love to make a game like that, but I need $5 million or something, and
say 6. And then
6, okay. But but there's Candy Crush was interesting, and you go, well, can we do something in that era? It's that genre, kind of the 3 in a row games. But I don't know, those things. I don't know if I have anything to offer there. I don't know. But I think any game that I love the Call of Duty games and the some of the new like Destiny first-person shooters. But I'm really a bad player at those. So. It is, but I think there's way too many games and not enough time. That's the problem,
That's what we put like 160 hours each with Ilari into Destiny, so we know it's maybe not the best investment. So one more last question here, Jani.
One more last question.
This is the last.
Hi Eugene, I'm Jani, PC and mobile games developer. This evening we've had a lot of discussion about accessibility and controls and gameplay and all of that. My question would be, do you have in your mind this kind of perfect combination or ideal combination of accessibility, controls and arcade gameplay? And what would that be? Because you've approached gaming from all the way from the hardware point of view. And I think we just compromise on the console controls and as well as mobile controls.
Yeah, I think every generation has some interesting technology. Like I think in the mobile, the touchscreen has really created all kinds of new game types that were not possible with a joystick and buttons, and kind of to be able to access the screen randomly without context. And so I think we've seen a whole revolution of new game types from the touchscreen. And I guess, the ultimate thing is obviously just direct brain input,
Soon. We're going to be Matrix soon.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of drill a hole in your head and, stuff a wire in there. But, it's weird. It seems like we're not quite there. And it seems like, I remember there was some games where you could kind of, there's been actually some controllers where you like think left, and you kind of go left and think right. But it certainly isn't as quick as just hitting left or right. I remember I played some of the Kinect and was very frustrated. You have to kind of flap your hand or something, and stop the game. Where's the start button, for God's sake? And so it's been. I think there's that quest for the intuitive controller, and it's still an ongoing quest.
We'll keep on looking and finding to see.
Yeah.
But we're sure that there's a lot of wonderful things coming into the future. Oculus, HoloLens.
Yeah. I think the whole stuff. Obviously the VR thing is amazing potential. Once we get by the resolution and the lag time and stuff, which seems to be slowly disappearing. I think about 9 times better than the Oculus 2, and I think we'll be there.
It's going to be very interesting to see all the beautiful stuff. It could be here next year even, that we get to see all kinds of. You never know. You never know. Hey, it's so awesome to have you here, Eugene, and thank you for Harry, and thank you for Mikko. I think it's been a great evening, am I right? It's been beautiful. Before we move on, before we start enjoying our company and mingling a little bit, I have the utmost pleasure of sharing something with you. Tonight, it's a big thing for us at Housemarque, and hopefully it's a big thing also for Eugene. we're announcing our next game project. And we'll be working together with Eugene as a cooperation to make that next project. So, there you go. Good to have you here, brother.
Why was I not informed of this?
Well, but we'll be announcing more information, but at least now you know.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Let's get some drinks going and have a wonderful evening. Go say hi to these guys. I'm sure they want to talk a bit more after a drink or two. All right. Thank you.